Earlier this year, our community lost a gentle giant. On the 8th of March 2020, Mr. Bruce White died after a valiant struggle with cancer. He left a devoted partner and colleague, Jody Druding, and left many of us diminished by his absence. He gave to all of us from his passion and understanding of biomechanics and simulation technology and valued friendship. Bruce began his career as a mechanical engineer at the University of Vermont, where he completed his education and then joined the Department of Mechanical Engineering and then orthopedic surgery as a research engineer. In 1979, he joined AMTI and eventually becoming its CEO. I first met Bruce in 2000 when I flew up to Boston to discuss some ideas for simulating soft tissue in a knee simulator. Bruce smiled at me and said, "Easier said than done." But Bruce was a doer and got to work on it. By 2004, Bruce and AMTI had applied for an NIH grant entitled Impedance-Based Knee Simulator Control, and in 2006 applied for a patent entitled Adaptive Control and Virtual Soft Tissue Simulation. The patent issued in 2010, and the technology now works beautifully on their simulators. This is how I got to know Bruce White. Bruce's career was devoted to AMTI. Most of you would know the company by seeing them exhibiting in conferences in a booth like this. Bruce was hands-on, never missing an opportunity for scientific discussion, sometimes with very well-known personalities in the field, sometimes with just anyone. All this during conferences when his other senior AMTI scientists were pondering the circular nature of the universe. Bruce was a serious engineer and scientist who led a high-technology company. Here he is with Dr. Joe Deck of AMTI, one of the smartest engineers I'd ever met, who speaks the language of multiple coordinate systems and 3D transformations and pose through Eulerian angles, and who lives and breathes system impedance, dynamics, and control. Bruce was so smart to bring Joe and AMTI to learn from and do great work. Bruce was hands-on in everything. Here, verbally steering a pallet jack carrying a simulator into a conference exhibit hall. Like all CEOs do. Then arguing with the hotel staff after discovering he had led the machine into the wrong room. This is Bruce's den in AMTI headquarters in Watertown near Boston. In this building, Bruce and team even worked with NASA and obtained grants from the National Science Foundation and others. Here is Bruce's CEO office and neat desk. Well, when this photograph was taken. But let's look closely at the desk. This really tells you how practical and engineer type of CEO Bruce was. Bruce and team designed the famous 12-station hip simulators used today by many companies. And of course the well-known 6-station knee simulators, which eventually had the virtual soft tissue simulation technique that I talked about earlier. Here's where the Vivo simulator machine is made in AMTI. It was Bruce's and AMTI's masterpiece in my opinion. So many smart people helped in his design. I know it works because I have 4 of them in the simulator room here in my lab in Nebraska. Literally 6 degrees of freedom of actuation configurable in multiple ways, and with the adaptive control and the virtual soft tissue simulation with multiple ligaments in all kinds of directions. Bruce White also contributed to international testing standards. He conceived of this ASTM international standard, which researched and synthesized from the literature various knee loading profiles beyond standard walking. Bruce was a leader of an innovative team. The back wall here shows some of the 19 invention patents to his name. He was good in managing people too. The overall AMTI team got bigger under Bruce's leadership. He did make many waves, some literally with his treasured Jeep, but he would take any occasion to show his team how much he valued them, because really he was very soft inside with a good heart. Bruce was generous, and AMTI funded the Force and Motion Foundation, giving travel scholarships to young investigators, and here are some of the many grateful recipients. This was at ORS 2014. Bruce was also elected and served as a member of the board of directors of ISTA. He and AMTI were champions of ISTA, generously contributed as an industrial sponsor for many years. Bruce had an international outlook. He was determined to bring the Chinese FDA and the companies to know more about safer implant testing. In 2013, he organized a 2-day seminar in China with over 100 government officials and company engineers all attending. He was a star, and he took all sorts of people with him to help. And the benefits of those tens of scientific talks, panel discussions, and training are being proven today in China. Bruce was peculiar in his love of the outdoors and exploration. He insisted for us to drive 3.5 hours outside Beijing to climb a very rough, unmaintained and hardly visited area of the Great Wall of China. So high up, so rough and even dangerous, you may think this flat section is okay, but it goes on and on for miles and goes up and up. And here is Bruce in blue at the bottom right of the photo, always at the front. And you can perhaps guess who was well above and so behind taking the photo. Every few gruesome hours we rested for 15 minutes or so. Bruce was tired and his wife Jodie, a perfect specimen of slenderness and fitness, showing some strains too. I was, of course, perfectly okay and totally managed enough finger force to press the camera button to take the photo. Well, Bruce did not leave children, but he loved children and always kind and generous to people. Bruce White was special and has left a big gap and big shoes to fill by the new CEO of AMTI, Mr. Albert Druding, a serene man who also likes the outdoors and, like all of us, with good and bad times. Like me, Albert appreciated Bruce White as a friend. Jodie was Bruce's wife, so they both, and all of us, loved Bruce. I would like to end by saying goodbye to Bruce, and on behalf of ISTA, AMTI, and our research community, thank you, Bruce, for your friendship and contributions to the field.